So let's unpack a lot of what you said. You've said a lot. You've hit on some things that are near and dear to my heart. The intersection between economic justice and racial justice, social justice, those three pillars. Tell me more about your approach and what distinguishes your approach as a Green Party candidate from that of, let's say, the Democratic Party candidate, because of the assumption that the Democratic Party would be the party for social and economic justice.
Well, I mean, I guess that could be the assumption, but when you really take a look at, and particularly here in Baltimore, and I mean, even nationally, when you look at outside of Bernie Sanders, who's talking about true progressive policy change to really address the issues. And so there's several differences. For me, I want to point out this important factor, because all too often what you hear as we have these conversations right now around police reform and state-sanctioned killings of unarmed black and brown people in this country,
yep.
what you often hear is about the black-on-black violence in the communities. That's the immediate rebuttal,
right.
Which is one, a non sequitur argument. But then two, understanding the importance of addressing economic injustice and understanding the direct connection between a young African-American male being killed in his own neighborhood, either by the police or by his peers, and knowing that in Baltimore City, in most cases, the neighborhood that he lived in or grew up in, he attended a school that didn't have heat in the wintertime. He attended a school where he could not drink the water because it runs through lead pipes. He attended a school that did not have air conditioning in the summertime and lived in a neighborhood that was void of resources, recreation centers, and most likely had crumbling infrastructure because the established leadership, elected leadership, continuously sacrificed that community and gave money to major developers and corporations at the expense of his neighborhood. And so understanding direct connections for what creates the economic connection to what creates the conditions for young African-American men to be in these neighborhoods in the first place and be cut off from access and opportunity to grow beyond what their conditions are. It's extremely important. And so for me, it comes back to following the money trail. And my campaign just a few weeks ago released the first phase of our platform called Banking for a Baltimore Undivided. And this first part is the economic development portion. It's a 21-page comprehensive economic development plan that's built on addressing issues of social justice and creating wealth in communities that have historically been ignored or void of wealth and resources.
Yeah, let's unpack that a little more, man, because people dismiss that intersection between the violence. I mean, you literally just hit on something that I've been just kind of ruminating in my head for a while, that we can both address the black on black crime as well as the police violence towards black people if we address the economic aspect of it, right? Because the reason that there is so much crime is an economic phenomenon. And in high poverty neighborhoods, you are always going to see high crime rates. But this is something that is casually dismissed by people who would otherwise call us allies, people who otherwise want our vote. So I'm really curious in terms of how you would communicate this to people who have for almost a generation just dismissed the need to address the economic factors, poverty, which leads to crime, as well as using that for racial justice, because that can also address the police officers' abuse of black people. What are you saying to the constituents? How are they receiving it? And is your message resonating?
Well, absolutely. It's an education component, and I think that's a really good factor of getting people to understand not only that the problem exists, but how do we address the problem. And so in my platform, and what we're doing is we're pushing progressive solutions to really address the wealth gap and the economic disparity, to not just create wealth for communities of color in Baltimore City that have historically been cut off from access, even with leadership that looks like them, knowing that there's systems that were put in place beyond that leadership. And so now looking at policy to really dismantle and break down those systems to create an equal playing field. And so the title of my platform is Banking for Baltimore Undivided, and the staple of it is what we call public banking.
Yep.
So knowing that the direct connection to Wall Street's grip on us, what we hear talked about on a national level, also has implications locally. knowing that in Baltimore we have municipal bonds that we've taken out that we're paying upwards of 15, 17, and 19% interest on. And who reaps the burden for that in high property taxes and being nickel and dime through fees and all sorts of other fines is the citizens. And so if we take our money, which is now a $3 billion operating budget, sitting in the bank, and that bank is using it to create wealth for its investors and for its executives, while the city sees little to no return on investment, on those investments, right? So if we take our $3 billion operating budget, or just starting with our $90 million rainy day fund, and we put it in an account and open up our own Baltimore City public bank, how we could leverage that to make investments and create wealth for the city, where we could in turn do things with the interest that we would gain, because we're not dealing with Wall Street anymore. We're controlling our own economic destiny. We could take the interest that we accrue, and we know that Baltimore City is a city that has 40,000 city-owned vacants. 40,000 city-owned vacants, and you can purchase one for between $2,000 and $5,000, and you can rehab it for between $50,000 and $80,000 and have a brand new home. But a traditional bank won't give you.
I got to come to Baltimore. I'm sorry. I can pick up a vacancy for how much?
You can pick up a vacant. I mean, it's going to be a shell, and you're going to have to rehabilitate. But you can pick up a shell for anywhere between $2,000 and $5,000 in the city. You can buy an entire block for $100,000 right now in Baltimore City. That's just unfortunate that the conditions have gotten to this point because it's been neglected this long. But that's just the reality.
Let me jump in there because I want to ask a follow-up question real quick, because this is important. I got to put my capitalist side. My capitalism side just came out. Let me put that to the side. The most important question I want to ask about this is if you do your plan and you're gaining that interest for the city, how do you institutionalize that the benefit from that interest goes to the city, not just the city, but the most needy in the city, to reverse the poverty instead of letting that wealth just amass to the top 1% of Baltimore?
Absolutely. And so that's the key, and that's the priority of first setting the mission and vision. But what we can do, as I was explaining, is we can give home loans to people who can't get them from a traditional bank because they're too small and the bank doesn't want to give you a loan that small, right? They'd rather give out a larger loan. We give them now to individuals who may have the $5,000 to purchase the home, but wouldn't be able to get a loan for the $50,000 to rehab it, right? We can now not only give them that loan, but we can give it to them at an even lesser interest rate because it's the Baltimore City Public Bank, which isn't driven by profit. So any interest that we make is a benefit for the city as a whole, right? So we could do things like give out small business loans to entrepreneurs who are interested in starting up but don't need more than $5,000 to $10,000 to get their business off the ground. And again, a traditional bank won't give them loans that small. And so also, before we do that, though, we would have the citizens who would come together and set the mission and vision of the bank. They would set the mission and vision of the bank, and it will be up to the city council to make sure that mission and vision is being adhered to. But we would hire banking professionals, community banking professionals, to manage the daily operations of it, to ensure. So if the city citizens decide that we want the interest to go towards education and fixing our infrastructure in our schools, and that's where the interest earned goes to. If they decide they want the interest to go towards rehabbing the 40,000 vacants that the city owns, and that's where it goes to. If they decide that they want the interest to go towards creating new jobs and incubators and startups, then it would go to the Mayor's Office of Employment and Development to really work on that. And so we can do with the interest whatever the citizens decide is needed. And further on in my platform, we go into what we call participatory budgeting. So allowing each city council district to really be allotted their own budget to do the developments that the citizens in that district see necessary. Not let the mayor or some outside developer come in and say, I want to do this here because it's strictly driven by profit, but based on what that community really needs at the time. So it's really, again, about shifting the power and decision-making process away from the bureaucracy of City Hall and corporate entities and into the power and into the hands of the people and neighborhoods that need it most again. And that's really how we maintain that, to ensure that it's an equitable process. And we have things in place to really look at the policies and the practices that we have. There's the 10 questions for equitable, racially equitable policy and legislation that was released by Associated Black Charities. They did a study, and there's questions that you go through to look at policy to evaluate it through an equity lens. And so those are the sorts of things we would definitely be looking to do throughout this process, because this isn't about making the wealthy even more wealthy. We've seen enough of that in this country. This is about providing opportunities for people who've been cut off from them to build wealth in their neighborhoods, in their communities, and for their families.